We are in my studio in my parents' garage, and this is where I do all of my letterpress work. This used to be a garden bench, but now has been transformed into what I mostly use for setting up pieces before I put them onto the press. It takes quite a bit of work beforehand, getting all the letters and getting all the spacing right. So I usually set it up on a tray here, and I have lots of space to do that, and then I move it over to the press. Most of what I print is cards and postcards. I sell mostly at the moment just kind of in little shops in Clarkston, and also sometimes small art shows. I think that letterpress is special because when you pick up a letterpress card, you know it's handmade because you can feel the impression in the card. You have that tactile aesthetic that you don't get anymore with something that came off of your printer at home, or even came off from, you know, a printer that Hallmark's using. Letterpress is getting really big again. That's why it's become hard to find presses and letters and images, because people are starting to realize what letterpress is again, appreciate it, and it's kind of the sought after thing now. So back here in this little cubby is where I keep all of my, or most of my, letters and fonts and spacing. And so every single thing that goes onto my press is hand set, so I have to pull each piece out and lock it in. And so every single letter is its own piece. And so if you're doing a wedding invitation that's got 400 letters on it, then you're pulling each piece out and each space between it, every single one. So these are my two cabinets that have most of my stuff. This one is my larger Hamilton cabinet, and Hamilton was a really big letterpress company. They're pretty famous for everything they did in letterpress. So what I have in my hands is called a composing stick, and this is usually what I'm pulling. So if I've got a whole line of information that I need to put, I pull each letter out of the drawer and I line it up on here. It just keeps it level for me. It's easier for me to put together, and then I can kind of slide it onto the press. And the thing about letterpress is, because it's a printing process, everything is backwards. So you set everything the opposite way of how you read it, which after a while you get the hang of, but at first it's a little tricky. But I also have a lot of what are called cuts, and cuts are images. So like advertising, a lot of stores, like a hardware store or even just a fashion store, would have had their own little printing press in the back, and they would print their own weekly sale bulletins and their own store signs, and advertisements. And so they would have cuts made that would have all of their information on it, or their imagery. Like some of these are like these flowers I got from France when I went to Paris, and so these ones I was really excited about because I've never seen anything like these, and these ones are wood. But then I have plenty that are metal. This one's like it says live oak on it. And all of this is furniture, and obviously not your household furniture. Furniture is kind of a fancy word for spacing. So this is what all goes into my press to help keep what I'm printing locked in. So everything that goes around it is usually furniture. If it's something really tiny, then we just call it spacing. Occasionally, if I do a project that's larger or takes a lot of time for me to set on the press, then I keep it in a galley tray, and I have a whole table that stores all of my galleys. And this is a galley tray, just this metal tray here, and this is what usually printers would do, even, you know, for newspapers. If they had an advertisement they were using consistently or a lot, they would keep it in a galley tray and keep it so that they weren't constantly resetting the exact same thing. So this is my main press. This is the one I use for pretty much everything I do, just because it's a really reliable press for me. Presses are essentially at this point antiques. This one's the newest one that I have. It's about 70 or 80 years old, but the three others I have are over 100 years old. And so this is my Vandercook Universal. I also have a Golding Pearl, a Chandler and Price, and a Baltimore. And this one can print the largest. This press is pretty rare. There's only about 2,000 left in the world. When they were produced, they were one of the most popular presses, but then when printing went to offset, people just threw them out. I mean, they literally went to scrap yards. I heard a story once about somebody using one as an anchor for a ship in England. So they were just kind of tossed like they had no use anymore. Because really to most people, they weren't an art form. They were just for printing. And that was, that had its purpose, but when they had another way of printing, they didn't need them anymore. Now we look at letterpress as an art form. Yeah, so I'll show you a little bit about how it works. It is 5,000 pounds. It's definitely by far the heaviest press I have, and it stays in the spot. It came here and it's never moved. So I keep some smaller trays of ink. I have some larger ones, but I keep quite a variety of colors. Sometimes I'll mix colors up and I'll just use a scrap piece of plexi and palette knife, but then there's other times where I'm just using straight color and I just go right onto the press. So my press has 5 rollers. Usually I ink the top one, and it's got this system. This is one of the reasons that Vandercooks are so, they're kind of a really sought after press. And it's because they have really, really smooth inking capabilities because they run on 5 rollers. So they're constantly making up for each other's mistakes. Whereas one of my other presses, it's only got 1 roller. And so if it gets something stuck in it or if it gets some kind of scratch, then you're always seeing that on your print. So I usually just take a little bit of ink, roll it off. And then this is a mechanical press. It runs off electricity. 2 of my presses do, and then the other 2 do not. They're hand cranked. This one's still a hand crank press though. So right now my rollers are lifted up. They're not moving off of each other, but I'm gonna lower them down to engage them. And then, like I said, I can usually just dab on the top and it'll start kind of taking care of itself. It's a pretty self-sufficient piece of machinery that I like. I pulled out some letters, and each letter is hand set and then has to be locked into the press. I have my lockup bar here, which can move pretty far out. So I can print really large spaces, which is awesome. And so, but my lockup bar has to be pushed in order to keep everything from moving, which the spacing does to the sides, but the lockup bar will keep it tight in. And so everything, all the spacing around it is lower than the actual letters, and the letters are what we call type high. And so those will be the only things that hit the rollers every single time. If I had something else on this press that was type high, then the rollers would hit that and they'll get ink on it. But all of the spacing, the lockup bar, the rollers will pass over it, but they won't hit it because they're not type high. So next what I usually do is once I've let it go for a couple minutes, it's distributed all the ink evenly to all 5 rollers, and I put the cover down. I'm just using some basic postcards. I do mostly cards and postcards. Sometimes I'll do posters and wedding invitations, but for the most part my work is cards and postcards. And I have a little foot pedal down here that I push in, and it lifts up these little feet on the top. My feet hold my paper in, and then I just drop it back down. Once I've dropped my feet down, got my ink on, put my paper in, I'm pretty much ready to run the print. So I'm just going to roll. So just do a little simple hello there. Once I heard somebody call this the Vandercook dance, and I didn't really know what they were talking about, but now I do. The other day I did a commission of 250 postcards, and by the end of it, not only did I feel like I was dancing, I felt like my arm was going to fall off. Okay. So this is one of my other presses. This is the small one, the baby one. This is a Baltimore, and it's essentially a business card press. It's about the only size card you can put into it. And it's just got the 1 roller. So as I talked about with the Vandercook, it's got multiple rollers to make up for any mistakes on inking or any little fuzz that might get in it. This one's not so easy to fix. So you have to monitor it pretty well. This one, again, is a hand crank press. It is different from the Vandercook because the Vandercook letters set flat. This one has a tray that comes out, and when you pull the tray out, then you put all your letters in, lock it in, and then you literally pick your tray up and slide it into the press. And so the rollers come down over the piece, you slide in your business card, and then it's going to press into your letters on the other side. And then while your roller's up here, it's inking itself again. So then you can go back down, take out your last card, put in a new one, and then go back up. So this wood box was what they shipped this press in. It's actually even got the shipping labels on two sides to a printing shop in Ohio. And so that's how they started selling these presses. Not long after, they scrapped that idea. Pretty shortly after, only about a year after the company opened in like 1890, they scrapped that idea and they started making metal bases to make it more even. You'll notice that the inking plate is turning each time. And so that eventually, after running it for quite some time, you'll get all the sides of the rollers, you'll get the whole inking plate, so then you're really getting an even distribution of ink on it. But this Golding Pearl, they were really well known for these heart-shaped foot treadles, and so they were famous for that. The reason I have collected all of these presses and all of this type, even though it's probably a little more than what I use for my size of business, is because eventually my goal is to open a small studio somewhere in the area where people can actually come take classes on letterpress and can learn about its history, how it works, and appreciate it as an art form.